What is going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel, and this is my live action Spider-Man ranking. This is ranking every single live action Spider-Man film, because if I was doing Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, I would choose Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse as my #1 Spider-Man film. It is my favorite Spider-Man film. I think it's still the best Spider-Man film, and it gives you the most out of Spider-Man that you want, really. And it gives you a lot of Spider-Man too, which I thought was really cool. But this is not a every single Spider-Man film ranking. This is just a live action ranking. I'll be ranking everything from the Sam Raimi trilogy, the Andrew Garfield double feature, and the Tom Holland Spider-Man films. Yeah, guys, let's just jump right into it. Make sure before I start this video, you guys put down below in the comment section what your ranking is of every live action Spider-Man film. I want to know from the worst to best, so make sure you definitely put down your list in the comment section below. Also, make sure you guys subscribe to this channel for more rankings just like this coming up very soon. And let's get into the ranking. My number 7 is The Amazing Spider-Man 2. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, when it came out, I was really excited for this film. I loved The Amazing Spider-Man. I thought what they did with Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker, where they had so much chemistry, I really liked that relationship, what they were building on top of that. And so, going into The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I had expectations that this film was going to be awesome, that it was going to be fun, and that it was going to definitely up the stakes and up the ante for the Amazing Spider-Man franchise. However, this film falls flat on its face. It's not a horrible film. I can still find enjoyment out of it, but the problem with this movie is they try to do too many things at once. There's too many plots going on. There's too much backstory for certain characters. I thought Jamie Foxx's character Electro was such a huge misstep and misfire that it did Jamie Foxx injustice. And I also didn't like the fact that they emphasized the Rhino is going to be a villain in this film, and he's in it for 2 minutes at the end. So, Amazing Spider-Man 2, Number 7. Number 6 goes to Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3. I actually really enjoy this film. I find a lot of entertainment out of it. However, it is in the lower level of Spider-Man films for me. And really the reason why is because, just like I said in Amazing Spider-Man 2, this film tries to do way too much, way too fast. And that is the biggest problem, biggest concern. They're trying to set up all these different films after this movie, trying to set up a Sinister Six, trying to set up, maybe even spin-offs of different characters, and you really feel that in the film. There's not really one particular anchored down villain, because you think it's Sandman, then you think it's Venom, and then you think it's Harry Osborn, and it just gets to a point where it just becomes too much. The film is unbalanced, and also you get the weird emo Peter Parker dance, which I don't get that at all. To me, I can find enjoyment out of this film. I still think it's pretty entertaining. The jokes still land. I do like what they do with MJ and with Peter and how they kind of have their struggles and their differences, and that they introduce Bryce Dallas Howard as Gwen Stacy. But unfortunately, I wasn't a huge fan of a lot of what this film tried to do, and Topher Grace being Venom, come on. What are we doing? Number 5, another film that I deeply appreciate, and that is The Amazing Spider-Man. I love this film. This is a film to me that when it first came out, this one was probably my favorite Spider-Man film back then, but having watched it a few more times since then and kind of understanding where we are with this Spider-Man character as a whole, this movie has to be at number 5 for me. And that's not a bad thing. I think this movie sets up a lot of interesting ideas. The number one problem that I have with this film is we already saw Uncle Ben die once, and we had to see it again in this film. And I thought that was kind of, it's like, okay, you shoot us in the heart once, now you're trying to do it again emotionally. It's not as emotional, it's not as heart-pulling, because we saw it coming a mile away. It's not very interesting. It doesn't do anything to us as an audience. And so that's one of my biggest problems with this film. Other than that, I did like the Lizard, played by Rhys Ifans. I thought what he was able to accomplish as a villain was actually really smart and really genuine. I also really loved Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone's relationship. I thought they had amazing chemistry. Probably one of the best comic book romances I've ever seen on screen and that has unfolded on screen. And so I really love the film for that reason. However, this is the same exact story that we got previously with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. Number 4, Spider-Man Homecoming. I really enjoy Spider-Man Homecoming. This is a great movie. This is a movie that, to me, defines who Spider-Man is, and that is a teenager who acts like a teenager. Tom Holland is the best Spider-Man we've had. And I loved Tobey Maguire. I loved Andrew Garfield in the role. But Tom Holland feels authentic to the character of Peter Parker. And he plays both Peter Parker and Spider-Man differently, where they're both their own types of characters, as opposed to the previous films where they were just kind of like intertwined and combined. And so the MCU really has a good grapple on who Spider-Man is and who he should be. I also really loved Michael Keaton as the Falcon. He was, for a little bit, the best villain in the MCU, until, of course, we got Thanos, and also Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger. But this is a film that is funny. It's fun. There's so much to love here. There's great action sequences. You get Iron Man in this film. My only problem with this film is that they try to turn Spider-Man into Iron Man Jr., and I hate that. I hate the iron suit. Spider-Man is cool on his own. I also really love that we don't have to watch Uncle Ben die again. This is a movie that takes us past that. It feels small scale in a huge, grandiose MCU, and that's really what I love about this movie. It doesn't try to go for something super off the walls, crazy big. This movie feels very contained, and it knows what it wants to be and how it wants to accomplish that thing. Number 3, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. Fantastic film. This is a fantastic film, and I wish that this could be number 2, number 1. Unfortunately, I don't love this film like I love the top 2 on this list, and it could change for sure, but this movie defined my childhood. I was obsessed with this film when I was a kid. I loved Spider-Man, and this movie made me fall in love with the character of Spider-Man. Tobey Maguire was an amazing Peter Parker, was an amazing Spider-Man. I'm not taking that away from him. The film, for me, however, I'm not a huge fan of the Goblin, played by Willem Dafoe. Now, I like the Goblin. I'm not saying I don't like him, but I'm not the biggest fan in the world of that character. And so, to me, I wasn't crazy about the action sequences that were happening in this film, but I really love the character drama. I really like the Uncle Ben we get in this film. And I also love the lessons that Peter has to learn and that he has to go through as he's really seeing himself change. My favorite sequence in this film is where Peter wakes up and has these different senses after being bit by the spider, and he is just kind of exploring his powers, and whether that be web shooting out of his hands, whether that be his hands being sticky. I just really love that because it helped me understand puberty in a way, because it's like our body changes and we need to kind of get used to that change, and it's kind of awkward and weird at first, but as long as we kind of start to get in that rhythm, then everything will be okay. Number 2, Spider-Man Far From Home. This movie was awesome. I loved it. I saw it twice in the theaters, probably going to see it a third time at some point. But this is a movie that, to me, has the best Spider-Man villain, my favorite Spider-Man villain, and that is Mysterio. I'm not saying technically he's the best that we've seen out of all the Spider-Man villains, out of all the Spider-Man films, but he's my favorite. And I really love what they do with the illusion sequences. I love how they make this movie feel, again, small scale MCU, but still has a major impact on where we are, and it's so relevant with where we are in the MCU as well. And I just really loved what they did, and I thought this was a great film to kind of transition us into what is post-Endgame. And that is what this film does so great, is it explains how is the world different now that Tony Stark is gone. That is why Far From Home is my number 2. And number 1, based on process of elimination, you guessed it, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man II. For a long time, this is hailed as one of the greatest comic book films of all time. It's still up there, but now that we've had films like The Dark Knight and Logan, I mean, those films have really kind of shown us what comic book films could truly be. And so this movie isn't up there with those 2 films, but it's still probably a top 4, top 5 all-time greatest comic book film. This is a movie that explains a lot about how Peter is trying to balance his life as Spider-Man and also as Peter Parker. And you also really get some good sequences where he's starting to lose his abilities as Spider-Man. So he's got to try to almost transition into a normal life without the suit. And then you also have an amazing train sequence, which is probably one of the greatest sequences, not only in comic book history, but in film history. I mean, it's phenomenal what they did with that sequence. It gives that intensity and that tension, which is something that I love about Sam Raimi because he is a horror director. He got his roots started from the Evil Dead series. So you get to see that tension, that build up in that sequence alone. It puts a little bit more at stake. Doc Ock, one of the greatest Spider-Man villains ever, probably the most flushed out Spider-Man villain, and you get an amazing performance once again from Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker. And this is before I felt like Tobey Maguire was getting a little too old to be Spider-Man. I still felt like he was kind of a college age, even though he wasn't. This is a movie that just defined my childhood, and I just truly love this movie. I watched it over and over and over and over again, and I still do. It's a great film. Anyway, guys, what is your ranking? List it down below. Let me know in the comments what you think of my ranking. If I was off, if I was correct, let me know. It's just, again, this is my ranking. This is not where you need to rank any of these films. Make sure you guys like this video. Subscribe to my channel for more content just like this. I will be actually in a video with my buddy Nate, so I'll post a link down below in the description. We go Criterion Blu-ray shopping, and it's my first time, so I lose my Criterion virginity. So make sure you definitely go check out that video. I'll post it down below. And Nate, if you're watching this, I want to know your ranking, buddy, because we talked about it in the car a little bit. Let me know your ranking. Anyway, guys, I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.